Here we have the structure of the basic religious concepts in Islam. Welcome. The source is excerpts from a book on the theory of religion, sects, and creeds in Islam. Like it's trying to unpack some terms we hear a lot, and that overlap. Exactly. This text gives like a map so we can grasp basic terms like religion. Millah, Shariah, manhaj, these terms do often get mixed up a lot. So our task today is to review this map that the text presents and clarify the distinctions it sets between these concepts. Excellent, so let's explore this structure together. We'll go over the core concepts that the source lays out. True religion, the millah, the Shariah, the manhaj, and then the sects and groups up to disbelief and polytheism. Then we'll see how the text links all this to practical application, meaning worship and dealings and even everyday things. Let's start from the foundation. The concept of religion itself, it always uses religion in the singular when speaking of the true religion, meaning there's no plural religions to refer to other differing beliefs. That's what the text is saying. It says the Qur'an didn't use that plural form to refer to those opposing Islam. Okay, so how did the Qur'an refer to those other creeds if it didn't use religions? The text clarifies this point. It says when the Qur'an wanted to refer to all those other aggregate beliefs. As opposed to Islam, it used the expression, the entire religion. Like in the verse about manifesting the true religion to make it prevail over the whole religion. The text's interpretation of this is that everything other than Islam, no matter how varied its forms, is counted as one thing against the one truth. And here's the point that might be surprising to some. Namely, the distinction the text draws between religion and millah. How does it present this difference? That really is a striking point. The text considers Judaism and Christianity from a Quranic viewpoint to fall under the concept of millah, not separate religions on the same level as the one true religion. And the proof it gives is the verse, and they said, be Jews or Christians, and you will be guided. Say, rather, the millah of Abraham upright. Notice the direct comparison here. Judaism and Christianity were described as millah and compared to Abraham's millah. So the source sees religion as Islam only, and the millah are like the ways or laws that came before, like Judaism, Christianity, and the Hanifiyah of Prophet Abraham. Yes, exactly. The text identifies these three millah as main examples mentioned in the Qur'an. The Hanifiyah, Abraham's millah, Judaism and Christianity. And it also stresses that the only correct millah that remained and that we must follow after the mission of the Prophet Muhammad is the Hanifiyah in its essence, which is represented by Islam and followed by Muslims. And it cites the verse, the millah of your father Abraham, he named you Muslims. So what definition of millah does the text offer to help us understand it more, linguistically or technically? It gives a definition combining language and usage. It says the millah is the way, conduct, or tradition that a person or a group follows, meaning the thing that governs their actions and speech, and it's often inherited or something the group has committed to. The text also links it to everyday usage when we ask someone about the origin of a strange act they did. What's your millah? Meaning, where did you get that from? And the text also points to the roots of this millah in the Qur'an. Yes, it ties it to their statements as they came in the Qur'an. Like the words of Moses and his people, we have turned back to you. As a basis for the Jewish millah and the words of the disciples, followers of Jesus, we are the helpers of God. We believe in God and bear witness that we are Muslims. As an indication of the Christian millah, but note, the disciples in the same verse affirmed that they are Muslims to God. And this supports the text's core idea of the one religion, which is Islam in its general sense. Submission to God and to all the prophets, exactly. That really is a precise distinction between religion and millah. Let's move to another paired set of interrelated concepts the text presents. Shariah and manhaj. The source links them to the verse, to each of you we made a law and a method. How does it distinguish between them? The Shariah, as the text describes it, is the rulings, obligations, and legislations that God reveals to a specific prophet. So it serves as the law that organizes the lives of his followers in time and place. It's like a divine constitution for each community. So we could liken it to that, yes. And because people's needs and circumstances change, the details of these heavenly laws can differ. Not all of them are one identical copy in everything. The text gives a clear example of this difference. What is that example? The example is that Jesus, peace be upon him, permitted for his people some things that were unlawful for the children of Israel in the Shariah of Moses. As he said in the Qur'an, and to make lawful for you some of what was forbidden to you. This clarifies the idea that the Shariah adapts to the conditions of the community it was sent to. Understood. So the Shariah is the law or instructions. So what role does the minhaj paired with it in the verse play? Is it something different? Yes, it's different and complementary. The minhaj is the clear, practical path for applying the Shariah. If the Shariah tells us what to do, the rulings, then the method tells us how to do it, the way and the approach. It is the applied pathway. And how is this minhaj applied among Muslims specifically, according to the text? The text clarifies that the foundational minhaj for Muslims is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, meaning the practical way in understanding, applying and clarifying the Shariah of Islam found in the Qur'an. His actions, words and approvals, all that forms the prophetic minhaj. The text also cites a well-known report speaking about the future of the ummah, which says, "Then there will be a caliphate upon the methodology of prophethood." So the minhaj is the practical living model for applying the Shariah. Shariah is the theoretical text, and the minhaj is the exemplary application. Very nice, that clarification. All right, let's get to the next part. I think it sparks a lot of debates, and can cause sensitivities too, sometimes among schools and sects. How does the text address them? Where does it start? The milieu of schools. It links their emergence basically to the Ummah's own understanding of Shariah texts, meaning the Qur'an and the Sunnah, in the sense that they're a natural product of human ijtihad, in trying to grasp the foundations and apply them to a changing reality and new problems. So these schools represent diversity in interpretation and application? Exactly. The text affirms that understanding and application can differ from one generation to another, or from one scholar to another, due to differing contexts, customs, and capacities too. But it sets an important condition, that this difference stays within branches, not fundamentals, and doesn't reach the level of radical divergence from what the Salaf were upon. And how does the text see these schools arising in practice? The text hints at the existence of orientations, or, meaning, different philosophies within the process of ijtihad in Islamic history. Some lean more toward literal adherence to texts, and some open the door more to reasoned ijtihad and opinion. And there are middle methodologies trying to combine both. This natural diversity in methods of inference led to distinct legal intellectual schools, known to us as madhabs, like the four famous Sunni legal schools: Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali, right? The text cites them as the most famous examples in fiqh. And it also notes that it's not just fiqh, no. There are schools in creed too, like the Salaf, and the Khalaf, the Asharis, and the Maturidis. The key point the source emphasizes here is that these schools, despite their diversity and differences in details and branches, are all considered part of Islam's fabric and agree on its major foundations, and the differences in branches are accepted and historically and legally present. That's about madhabs as an expression of acceptable diversity. So where do sects fit in this picture? Here comes the important distinction. If madhabs differ in understanding branches while agreeing on fundamentals, then sects, as the text defines, are groups whose differences touch some of the fundamentals themselves, or whose difference is in the minhaj, the mode of application, in a radical way that conflicts with the general method of Muslims. Does that mean these sects are entirely outside Islam? Not necessarily all. The text uses an important term to describe some of these sects, namely al-Qibla. That means they still share with most Muslims, turning toward the Kaaba as a symbol of worship and unity, yet even so, they may hold views or practices that contradict agreed-upon fundamentals or the prophetic minhaj in certain aspects, so it's a spectrum, really. But does the text draw a line? As in, when is difference considered a total exit from Islam in its view, such as belief in God's oneness and his divine attributes, belief in the heavenly message of the Qur'an, belief in the Prophet Muhammad as the seal of the messengers, and in all that the messenger brought? Whoever opposes Muslims on these fundamentals is considered outside the religion of Islam, even if they claim the name Muslim. And how does the text describe that exit? What terms does it use? It uses two basic terms here, kufr and shirk. Kufr, as they define it, is the denial or rejection of anything known necessarily in the religion. or to intentionally act contrary to the Shariah of Islam. As for shirk, it defines it as directing any form of worship due to God alone to anyone besides God. So how does it link all this to practical life? You mentioned it speaks about 3 domains: worship, transactions and matters. Let's start with worship, right? After setting the theoretical frame, the text moves to show how Islam orders one's bond with God and life. Regarding worship, meaning a person's direct relationship with God, the text divides it into 3 linked levels and ranks them. Based on the famous hadith of Gabriel, first, the level of Islam. This is the base, representing the outward practical submission to God. Its 5 pillars are well known: the 2 testimonies, prayer, zakat, fasting, pilgrimage. These are the pillars of outward practice. Second, the level of Iman. This is deeper and represents the inner doctrinal side and the heart's certainty. Its 6 pillars: belief in God, His angels, His books, His messengers, the last day, and destiny. It's good and it's bitter. These are the foundations of creed. Third, the level of Ihsan. This is the peak, representing excellence in performance and full God-conscious watchfulness in every act. Its single comprehensive pillar: to worship God as if you see Him. And if you do not see Him, He surely sees you. The text notes that the spiritual and moral dimension is sometimes called Sufism, where they focus on cultivating humility, sincerity, and noble character. So it is an integrated system. Practice of Islam, conviction of Iman, and the quality and spirituality of Ihsan. Exactly. Now the second domain, transactions, that's quite broad. It is indeed broad. Transactions include all people's interactions in society. And the text affirms that Islam did not leave these interactions random. No, it set a precise legislative system aimed at justice and benefit. This system relies on graded legal rulings that regulate every act: the obligatory, the recommended or sunnah, the permissible, the disliked, and the forbidden. The 5 well-known rulings. And how is this system applied to different aspects of life? The text gives examples showing just how comprehensive the system is. It mentions, for instance, how Islam organizes economic dealings on non-usurious principle, and how it regulates matters of security through jihad in its broad sense, for the defense of truth and justice. And it also includes social and judicial aspects, certainly. The text points to organizing society on the basis of family and social cohesion, and establishing a judicial system on justice and equality. And it extends as well to encouraging civilization and development through knowledge and work, and to steer thought and literature toward reflection and paying attention to health, and even how to deal with history so we take lessons from it. Every field has its rules and guidelines that come from the Sharia. Truly a comprehensive vision for organizing life. Okay. What's left is the third domain the text mentioned, which is things. What does it mean, and what principle governs it? What's meant by things is everything a person deals with: materials, tools, and possessions in daily life. Food, drink, clothing, housing, transport, and the like. The general principle the text states here is a basic and important legal maxim. The default ruling on things is permissibility and lawfulness, meaning that everything is halal and permitted, unless evidence comes to forbid it. Exactly so. Did the text mention examples of these prohibitions? Yes. It cited clear examples of prohibitions that have explicit texts, like forbidding eating pork and drinking wine, and forbidding men from wearing silk and using gold and silver utensils. These are clear examples of exceptions to the rule of permissibility. Okay, and new things, or those with no direct text on permissibility or prohibition, are left to scholars' ijtihad to assess benefit or harm by analogy with Shariah's general principles. We began with the basic distinction between the one religion, the truth, which is Islam, and the multiple creeds that represent earlier or different paths. Then we understood the difference between Sharia as divine law and the manhaj as the prophetic method for applying that law. After that, we entered the subtle and important difference between madhabs, which represent acceptable diversity in understanding branches within agreed-upon fundamentals, and between sects, whose differences may lie in some of those fundamentals or in the general method. And finally, we saw how this theoretical framework applies to practical life by organizing worship. In its 3 levels, Islam, Iman, Ihsan, and organizing transactions in all their details by the system of the 5 rulings. and organizing interaction with material things by the rule that their default is permissibility. How do we balance the necessity of holding fast to constants and fundamentals, and at the same time, the importance of margins with the legitimacy of difference, and accepting diversity in branches, applications, and opinions? This question isn't just about the relationship between different madhabs within Islam, no. It also extends to how we understand and organize relations with followers of other creeds. A truly deep point that deserves from us a pause for reflection.